Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk. And in this episode of God Talk, we're going to call it Married and Miserable. Can Christians say that out loud? What's inspired me from this one is because I gave a sermon this past Sunday that was talk about relationship chaos. We've been talking about different chaoses that we experience in life. Physical chaos, spiritual chaos. We're going to look at just like global chaos, financial chaos. We'll just look at different chaoses. Last week was relationship chaos, and just a small subset of that was, marriages, because marriages can insert a lot of chaos into our lives. The funny thing is since I've given that message, I've gotten a lot of feedback from people. I've gotten, some messages from people saying, thank you so much. It really helped me in my relationship with, different relatives and so forth. But I've gotten a fair amount of just kind of snarky comments about what that did in people's relationship marriage after they both husband and wife heard that message on Sunday. So I am devoting this podcast to these same four principles that I talked about last Sunday. I gave 4 pieces of practical advice. I said the cornerstone for there not being relationship chaos, and this is certainly true in the marriage, is forgive as Christ forgave you and love as Christ has loved you. I stand by that. But I said because it's an imperfect world, we need to do additional things in addition to that because that may not be enough. And so I talked about 4 different keys. I said people will treat you the way that you allow. I talked about the importance of keeping strong boundaries. I talked about giving them the relationship they want. I talked about reward positive behavior and punish negative. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to look at those 4 principles specifically in terms of marriage. Like it was just a small subset of what I talked about in the sermon. But we're on this past Sunday. But we're going to go into greater depth and detail on this podcast. So I did my daughter and son-in-law's wedding. I don't know, about 4 years ago now. And I'd forgotten I said it, but my son-in-law reminded me of it after the sermon this past Sunday. He said that basically what I said in their wedding ceremony is marriages don't end well. And I'm here to tell you, like, they don't. Like, I can promise you this. I'm nearly 100% certain, except for very rare situations, your marriage is not going to end well. It can't. Because there's only 2 ways that a marriage can end: death or divorce. Now, I said I'm 99% sure your marriage won't end well. I guess if you've been married, 50 years and you both happen to die at the same time of carbon monoxide poisoning in your sleep at the house, like, I guess that ended well, right? But all things being equal, one's going to die before the other if you make it to death, because many of them at least have, end in divorce. So here's my point. Like, if marriage isn't going to end well, then why don't you make it the best you possibly can be in between the time that you say I do and they pronounce you dead or you file for divorce. Here's a piece of advice I give people in marriage counseling. I say marriage doesn't have to be horrible. Listen, everyone's got capacity. Every couple has capacity. Like, just like I can't be a professional athlete, like I can't be a perfect husband. And like, we're all limited by our capacity. So some people are going to be more compatible than others, and maybe they have a higher capacity. Some people are going to be more annoying than others, and they're going to have a lower capacity, or they just see everything different all the time. And so they're never going to be amazing. But I think we can all agree on the fact that we don't have to be miserable in our marriages. So here's the facts, and this isn't news to anyone. Half of all marriages end in divorce, and we kind of leave it at that. And it's almost the assumption that, well, if your marriage doesn't end in a divorce, well, it's a great marriage. It's a good marriage. That's not the case. Not the case at all. Um, in fact, I did a wedding recently, and I gave these statistics, and I gave them, people were just like laughing because we know it's true. It's a little bit of a nervous laugh, I guess. I gave these same statistics at church on Sunday, and especially in late service. I mean, people were audibly laughing boisterously out loud. Half of all marriages end in divorce. Maybe of the half that don't, 10% are just blissful. I mean, the two are just like perfectly compatible, match made in heaven. It is their soulmate. The stars align. Everything is just perfect. And for the most part, the rest of us look at people like that and we want to throw up in our mouth because they're just disgusting to watch, right? Um, and so, of the half that don't end in divorce, let's just say 10% are blissful, like just perfect for each other. I'm going to take a stab at this, and I'm only going to take a stab at this because, well, as a pastor for 30 years, having done a lot of premarital counseling and knowing a lot of people, my observation, it's not scientific. My observation is of the ones that don't get divorced, half are pretty miserable in their marriage or have a certain level of miserableness. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that I am. And so if 10% of those that don't get divorced are blissful and half are some level of miserable, that leaves about 40% of the people who remain married that are somewhere in between miserable and blissful. And the question is where are you in that? And certainly in that 40%, and certainly in that the whatever number of people are miserable but staying committed to their marriage, like there is room for improvement. I mean, if you're blissful, there probably isn't. Like, thank God and be grateful and don't mess it up, right? But if you're in that other 90%, then the question is what can you do about it? If divorce is not an option, and it's not, and that 50% that don't get divorced, then the question is what can you do to make it the best that it possibly can be, with having realistic expectations that, once again, all relationships, all people have capacity. Someone's never going to be someone they can't be. They're just not wired that way. They're not genetically that way. They're not temperamentally that way. We can alter our behavior a little bit, but only so much, right? And so you have to be realistic in what your expectations are for your spouse, because you two, maybe to have a pretty average marriage is pretty good, because if it was anyone else that had your temperament, their temperament, your likes, their likes and dislikes, like anyone else probably would have divorced. But you know what, you're doing the hard work, and it's a solid marriage, but it's not a great marriage. Sometimes maybe that's a victory right there. You take an NFL team that doesn't have a lot of great players and they have a 500 season. That's not a disappointment, because maybe with any other coach and any other situation, any other season, they may have had a 1-win victory. So I think like we just have to be upfront and like honest with what reality is. It's kind of like not everyone's going to have a 10 body, like a perfect body. I even look at myself where, we're impacted physically by genetics. You don't think we're impacted emotionally by genetics? I mean, my brother's 300 pounds. My dad was not tall enough to be 300 pounds, but he was probably close. And so, unfortunately, my son can eat 3,500 calories and be thin as a rail. I'm hoping that catches up with him someday. But like for me, if I get to the normal calories for a guy, chances are I'm starting to pack on some pounds. I mean, we're impacted by our genetics, and I'm just wondering, I mean, why are we only impacted physically and we're not impacted in terms of our personality? I think we are, if we're going to be honest about it. So, all right, here's what we're going to do in this podcast. We're going to take those 4 suggestions I gave in the sermon this past Sunday, and we're going to apply them strictly to marriage to kind of to work this out a little bit more and maybe give a little bit more practical advice to people in their marriages. The first piece of advice was people will treat you the way that you allow. You may not like how your spouse speaks to you, and frankly, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. Like when they get mad, when they get hangry, when they get tired, when they get crabby, they can be pretty well, I can't use the word. I mean, I could, but I won't, right? You know what I'm talking about. Um should you allow them to speak to you that way? No. No, in fact, you shouldn't. But if you allow them to, I guarantee they're going to continue doing it. I mean, frankly, like, why should they do something different? Some of us don't like how lazy our spouses are. Well, if you're going to allow them to be lazy and for you to do the cooking and the cleaning, if you're going to allow them to, when they come home from work, plop their happy rear end on the couch and, drink a beer and watch TV while you do, all the cooking, cleaning, and, everything else around the house, feeding the animals, blah, 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 etc. You're like, well, why shouldn't? I mean, if you're going to let them do it. So the question is, what do you do? Well, first of all, do something. Because to do nothing means nothing's going to change. People are going to treat you the way that you allow them to treat you. Now, the question is what should you do? Well, this is God talk, so I think I would, be leaving something out if I don't say, well, first and foremost, how about praying about it? Praying that God would give you wisdom. God is a God of wisdom, and he can give us wisdom if we ask for it. God can also change hearts, right? And so I think if you're in that situation where you're not happy with where your marriage is at, I think the first thing you need to do is you need to be actively praying about it, that God would give you some wisdom on what you can do so that, people aren't treating you, your spouse isn't treating you the way that you don't want to be treated. Now, if, you're praying about it and nothing seems to be happening there, chances are God's expectations you're going to do something about it. There's a Bible passage that says, what good is it if someone's in need, you say, I pray for you, and you do nothing to help with their needs? Like that's just silly, right? And so sometimes we're kind of lazy like that, even in terms of our own relationships. Well, I've been praying about it. Great. Well, what good is it if you just pray about it and you're not willing to do anything about it? Well, what do you do? Well, I don't know. It depends. Every relationship's different. Every person's different. What works for me won't work for you. What works for you won't work for me. And what works for both of us won't work for them. So, I mean, first of all, what you should do is if someone's not treating you the way that you think you should be treated, you talk to them. And if they're reasonable people, if they, have a conscience, if they care, hopefully they'll take that into consideration and their behavior will improve. Oh, you don't like it when I just drop my dirty underwear on the middle of the bedroom floor and leave it there for you to pick up? Oh, all right. I guess I can pick that up, right? So how about just expressing it? This is the thing, like every time I do premarital counseling, or not premarital, marital counseling, like usually communication is horrible and conflict resolution is horrible, as people take these inventories that diagnose their relationship. So you just start with communication. Talk to them about it. So you're praying about it, and now you're using your words, right? And don't use them lazily. Speak the truth in love. Do not be lazy in your speech. Do not be lazy in your speech. Like, let me say it again. Do not be lazy in your speech. How you say things is sometimes more important than what you say. So if the praying doesn't work, if the sharing verbally what's not working, well, the next thing that you can do is, well, maybe you can pull back on what you do. If you're the one doing all the work around the house and the other person's just sitting on their happy hiney, maybe you stop like cooking. Maybe you stop cleaning the dishes, and eventually, you know what? You're not gonna have any clean dishes, and we're gonna, Houston, we're gonna have a problem. Maybe you stop doing the laundry, and here's the deal. Like, if you don't have anything to pull back in your relationship that will make the other person suffer, well, that there's your problem right there. Like, you're only being selfish. You're only doing stuff for yourself. and they can't appreciate anything that you do. Like if there's nothing you can do in which they'll notice that you're not, doing it, that's probably part of the problem. So if you are doing things, then as you pull back on certain things, you're going to see if it gets their attention. Now, mind you, if it's like doing the dishes because you cook and you don't think you should have to clean too, like you can't just like stop after a day and say it doesn't work. I mean, you got to wait till you like there's no dishes for a week. You got to wait till like there's no toilet paper left on the roll and it's kept in the other room, and have to watch them run across the house naked to get a roll of toilet paper. Like you got to do it until there's an impact. And then you probe, because some things aren't going to bother some people and other things are going to bother them. And once you get their attention, they may not have wanted to talk before. That's why you've had to pull back on what it is you've done. But now you've gotten them where you've gotten their attention, because it's bothering them that you're not doing it. And guess what happens now? Now we talk because we have your attention. So people only treat you the way that you allow. You start with prayer and then communication. If neither of those work, then hopefully there's things that you're doing that they're going to notice when you don't. And when you stop doing it, hopefully that opens the door to kind of finding some negotiation, some middle ground. Once again, it's not going to be your way, but hopefully it doesn't have to be fully their way. And that there's some place in the middle in which you can both be happy with mediocrity. Is mediocrity great? No, but it's a whole lot better than horror and having a hell of a, having a horrible relationship, right? A living hell. Like that's not good either. All right. Number 2, keep strong boundaries. If they get nasty when they drink alcohol, you're going to insist that there's no alcohol in the house. Frankly, you're going to insist that they don't drink. But what you can't control is like if they're stopping off for happy hour on the way home. That's a whole nother kind of discussion if that starts happening. But the boundary can be no alcohol in the house, no alcohol when we go out. That is a strong boundary. If they overspend, a strong boundary is that like you handle the finances. If they get hangry because they go too long with eating, a strong boundary is like if I tell you you're getting hangry, put something in your mouth and eat it, then they do. If they speak disrespectfully, a boundary is you walk away. You refuse to engage in it. Here's the problem with boundaries. Boundaries are oftentimes broken. And I say you must have strong boundaries. And what that means is you don't back down on it. It's kind of like we do this with our kids all the time. I never did, but people do. We make threats and we don't follow through. A boundary is that like you make the threat, you lay down the law, and you follow through. And it is going to be forever this way until the day I take my dying breath, or until we've reevaluated that the situation's gotten better, and we're going to start allowing you to have a little alcohol in the house because you've learned to be responsible with it. You don't like when they're all sweet or they're making your life difficult, or that you cave. Having a strong boundary is not about caving. It's about come Hades or high water. I can't say the word hell twice in a podcast, so I won't. Come Hades or high water, like this is how it's going to be. I'm sorry, but like you've lost the right for this, and things don't go well when you do. Therefore, we're not going to be doing this. Third thing, this is the one people really picked up from the podcast that they really, from the sermon, and that they really loved. And honestly, it's probably my personal favorite, is that you give them the relationship they want. Now, I should have clarified when I preach this, giving them the relationship they want doesn't mean that like you allow them to be addicted to drugs. Giving them the relationship they want is if they want to abuse you, if they want to verbally abuse you, if they want to disrespect you, just let them have that. No. Not on the negative. When I say that, what I mean is like we all have expectations of what marriage should be. I'm applying it specifically to marriage, but this works for all kinds of relationships. We all have this expectation. Maybe you need to lower your expectation. Maybe you need to take your princess crown off, or your prince crown off, and realize, you know what? Either that's not in their capacity, or frankly, they're too lazy in the relationship. They're not going to do it. They're never going to do it. Stop nagging them about it and just accept that that's them. Um, the you know, and here's where that's actually biblical. I would argue is what we do is we learn to serve the other person. And even though your way's not my way, I'm going to lower and change my own expectations in order to serve you. That's not a bad thing, honestly. It's kind of Christ-like, right? Not that Christ lowers his expectations for us, but he's constantly serving us, even in our failings and in our shortcomings. So what that means is if you're in your relationship, your spouse isn't a talker, well, then get used to talking less. If they're not a walker, get used to walking less. Maybe they don't want to go on walks with you, but then don't expect them to. If intimacy isn't as important to them as it is to you, guess what? In a Christ-like servant sacrificial way, how about you change what your expectations are and what you expect in that relationship? That's what giving them the relationship they want means. Is not that you allow them to spend you into bankruptcy. That gets trumped by having strong boundaries, right? But it's about when people don't meet your expectations, and we all have expectations of what certain things should be in life. Maybe it's your expectations that need to change rather than the other person. And if we all had just a few less expectations of each other in our marriages and in all kinds of things, life would be so much more beautiful, wouldn't it? Expectations sometimes can be a big negative in relationships because it causes us to look at the relationship a lot more negative than what we need to. Maybe they're not into walking around the block with you, but you know what? They mow the lawn. They cook dinner. They do fix things around the house. They do this. Like, get over it. Walk the dog. Walk with your friend. Walk listening to Pastor Greg's God Talk podcast. Like, get over that. Stop nagging. Like, give them the relationship they want. All right. And the last one. Reward positive behavior, punish negative behavior. Now, this is going to sound a little manipulative, but I don't mean it to be. It's just one, reality. And two, if you're doing it from a Christ-like perspective, it's not manipulative. So hear it through that lens, please. So the key to this one, reward positive behavior, punish negative, is you've got to be needed. You've got to be significant in the family structure. If you're not significant and needed in the family structure in the marriage, you don't have anything to punish. Because when I say like punish bad behavior, I'm not saying like you pull out the belt and you start whipping your spouse, right? Like, let's not even go there, right? So what I'm saying is punishment is that you withdraw some of the perks and some of the benefits that are part of that relationship. Listen, women do that all the time with the physical. They're not dumb, right? So if you have things to offer, if you don't have anything to offer, you have nothing to pull back. Once again, there's the problem. But if your spouse relies on you to do certain things, if your family relies on you to do certain things, and then they start like going off the deep end and they start acting dysfunctionally and unhealthily, you can put your foot down because, fine, I'm not going to do this anymore. Going back to the kind of the dish, I'm not going to wash the dishes. Someone else is going to have to do it. I'm not, hey, good luck eating, for the next month. I'm not cooking for the next month. Like you've got something to use to help modify their behavior. I'd like to say to like hold over their head and to control them. Once again, that's where that sounds negative. But if we serve our spouse, once again, we're speaking within the context of the marriage on this context. If you serve your spouse, frankly, we kind of get used to being served. I mean, if you're going to bring me like a beer every time I finish mowing the lawn, if you're going to like have dinner always sitting on the table when I get home, like I'm going to get used to that. In fact, I'm going to expect it. And then as I expect it, I probably don't appreciate it. And when I get to the point that I don't appreciate it, you probably should stop doing it because guess what? I'll start appreciating it again. That's what I mean when I say reward positive behavior and punish negative. If you don't have anything to to get the other person's attention because they're behaving negatively and dysfunctionally, then there's your problem, or it's a big part of your problem. All right, I I hope this helps. Marriage, I said it's not for the faint in heart. It's a difficult sport. I'm currently right now doing each week 4 different either marriage or premarital counseling sessions, which is a lot to do each week, in addition to my normal workload. And I feel like there's just, you know, there's no shortage of people who need it. I had someone just drop in the other day needing to talk to stuff, and part of what it got into was kind of a relationship conversation as well. So everyone deals with it. The question is like, we just don't like to say it out loud. Well, let's be honest about it with each other. Let's be honest with our spouses, and to know that, like, especially in a Christian marriage, a Christian relationship, love and forgiveness is the cornerstone. And if you do that, and both do that, you're not going to have any problems. The problem is both aren't going to do it, and you're not going to do it perfectly. And then that's when you've got to do some of these other things, where someone said to me after the sermon on Sunday, they're like, you're really kind of talking about behavioral modification. It really is. But I would argue it is from kind of a loving Christian perspective, in which you're not willing to stay in dysfunction, because once again, God does not give us relationships to be miserable. If he had, he would have just created Adam. He didn't need to create Eve. But he said it's not good for man to be alone. So he wants us to be in relationships. And so why keep it miserable? Anyways, I hope some of this stuff helps you. Always interested in your feedback. But thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk. And I look forward to talking to you next time. God bless.